For our newcomers, welcome again. We're just about to begin. You're joining our live webinar, Investigation of AML Cases. The topic today is manual versus automation, and we're pleased to see so many of you. See the numbers continue to rise as we're live. And we'll move on to our speakers. So today, already introduced myself, but you have me as the moderator. I'm head of AML product at SumSub. And we're joined by the lovely Hayley West, who is Ombudsman Leader at the Financial Ombudsman Service. And Hayley, would you please give us a few words about yourself?
Of course. Hi, everybody. So as Natalie says, I'm Hayley, Ombudsman Leader. The Financial Ombudsman Service, for those of you that don't know, we act as quite a crucial point actually for consumers and financial businesses in terms of dispute resolution. So we're not the regulator with the FCA. We just really kind of look at putting things right when things may have gone wrong. And I lead a department which focus on the often challenging process of account closures, a wide spectrum of issues there, from kind of general banking, relationship breakdown, to the more serious concerns which we're here for today, kind of linked to financial crime and fraud. So yeah, I suppose for those of you that aren't as aware or haven't used us that much in the past, our goal is really to strike a balance between protecting the firm from financial crime and upholding the rights of our customers. We appreciate that sometimes a challenging ask, but by focusing on the fair resolutions, sharing the knowledge, proactive adaptation, we really just try to navigate the complexities and contribute to a more secure and customer-centric banking environment. I'm really pleased to be here today, so thank you all for joining.
And we are super pleased to have you, Hayley, and appreciate you taking time out of your busy day at the Ombudsman to sit with us. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Una Vandenberg. She is Executive Director, Growth and Advisory at AML Watcher. Una, would you please introduce yourself for our audience?
Hi, thanks very much, Natalie. And Hayley, also lovely to see you, and you too, Ina. My name is Una Vandenberg. For those of you who have not met me before, I've been in the industry now over coming up 22 years, showing my age. Predominantly worked in-house across the globe. I spent 12 years in Asia, 7 years in London, and now based back in Europe. I'm really excited actually today to talk about the subject we're going to look at, which is automation and manual processes, because there is no simple solution for any institution, and it's not one size fits all. So I think hopefully it's going to be an interesting discussion, and we've got some great people on this panel. So thank you, SumSub, for arranging it, and thank you to AML Watcher also for co-sponsoring.
Thank you, Una, and appreciate again the time out of your busy day and week to prepare for this. And over to Ina. So Ina is a SumSub. She is our tech pre-sale manager and will be showing you some seriously cool stuff towards the end of the webinar. Ina, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, it's nice to see so many people attending today, so we're excited to be here. I'm Ina. I'm a technical pre-sale manager at SumSub. I have over 15 years of experience in finance and technology, so my main role here at SumSub is to help clients to understand what technical capabilities SumSub platform has, and also help them in the implementation process. So yeah, I will be showing a short snippet of how the technology can help in automation and case management setup from the SumSub perspective.
And again, thank you to you, Ina. I know you're super busy, so we appreciate your time on this call today. All right, so we'll move through. We have quite a packed agenda and lots of lively discussion that we want to get through. So the topics that we'll cover will mainly be these 6. We'll discuss the anatomy of a real AML case from alerts to FIU reports. We will discuss manual versus automated workflows, when to use which, how to cut false positives and investigation time, and what KPIs to track to measure AML automation success. I think that's always a tricky one to figure out. How do you measure that success after implementation of new automated processes? Some real use cases from fintech and banking teams doing it right, And also, what's next in the AML tech world? Is it rules engines? Is it blueprints, AI, machine learning, or something else? So we'll hand over to our speakers to have this engaging discussion, and let's get kind of tucked into the meat of it. So the first topic, what's broken in manual AML processes today? And my first question goes to Una. And this is considering the entire anatomy of an AML investigation. I'd like to begin with some current challenges. So from your perspective, Una, from the operational side of things, what are the biggest pain points in manual investigations today?
It's a really good question, and there's not one answer. There are various challenges we've had over the past couple of years. One of the biggest challenges has been information sharing due to increased privacy laws and restrictions. And we've finally seen some relaxation of that in Europe with the recent Article 75 coming through. So that was welcome to the industry. But what that did was prevent information sharing within the organization. But in particular, when we talk about information sharing, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation today without talking about data. And in any investigation, going back to your data is your 101. Where is your source of the truth within your organization? And what we have found in many organizations is we have multiple sources of the truth within the systems. And what does that mean? Well, we could have contradictory data in some systems, but also indeed we could have data that actually isn't visible because it hasn't necessarily been uploaded into systems. It's been kept on the shelf, so to speak. A great example is when we onboard customers, we have approximately 1,200 data points per customer, but we actually only use around 120 to 140 of those day to day. So we've left an incredible amount of knowledge and information on our customers on the shelf at the point of onboarding. And the only way that we really understand who our customers are is not through what they tell us at KYC, unless you're using digital identity, and that's a separate discussion, but rather it's how the account is operating. And if we don't have the right data basically plugged into our systems, and we're using static rules and scenario-based monitoring systems where we've basically bucketed clients, we're looking for a needle in a haystack. And as I said earlier, the only way to truly know who your customer is through how the account is operating. So all of these challenges actually impede investigations. They impede them because, one, we don't necessarily identify complex networks on our books, which is impossible in some instances without the usage of some forms of AI technology. Secondly, information sharing has had challenges over the past few years. But thirdly, it's about data. Like, how well do we understand our customers? And we spend an exceedingly great amount of time on investigations because of the lack of consolidated and source of the truth data. So this is our current problem statements across the globe, and it's not restricted to one jurisdiction. It is a global issue that I've seen, whether I've been in APAC, Middle East, US, or Europe.
Thanks, Una. And that's super interesting, the topic around consolidation, because where you have all this data in different systems or different places, I think we discussed, prior to the session that there was a world, and potentially there are still some companies who deal with their data in a manual way that, not bringing that all together can cause some serious issues and a lack of human oversight. So totally agree there on some of your points. And I have a similar question for Hayley, and probably going to provide a different perspective here, but you're obviously in quite a unique position at the Financial Ombudsman, where you've got an opportunity to assess investigations that are happening on the part of the financial institutions. Do you see any efficiencies, or where do you see the most inefficiencies when it comes to traditional case handling at the Ombudsman?
Yeah, thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Una. I think it's really helpful to kind of hear from your perspective as well. I think for us, as you say, Natalie, we see a completely different perspective. I would say probably one of the biggest inefficiencies is sort of the sheer lack of transparency during the AML investigations. So, many of our customers are told that the account's frozen pending investigation, no clear explanation as to why or what steps they can sometimes take to resolve the situation. And of course, 9 times out of 10, that's completely appropriate, so that people aren't tipping off kind of live investigations. But it's more just really kind of, I think the consumers that we see that come to us, they feel like they're being kept like it's a bit of a secret investigation. Sometimes these people aren't found that, there is any wrongdoing. And that creates kind of immense anxiety and distress for some people, that their accounts are blocked, they can't access their money, they have no idea why. And they're kind of then left guessing, unsure of kind of what they've done wrong, and feeling like they're sometimes unfairly being accused of criminal activity. I think for that, the manual side of it, which adds into that, is then the time that it takes, and sometimes the quite lengthy and unpredictable timelines. I think, obviously we see firms that have to escalate things, either asking questions of other financial firms or going to kind of other industries, police. For those in England, the National Crime Agency obviously play a big part in this as well, and there are other areas. And I think sometimes these consumers are left in limbo for weeks, sometimes months, without any real clear indication of when a resolution can be expected. That then obviously plays into other areas that we see quite a lot of: financial hardship, vulnerable consumers, for example, and especially if access is critical for kind of daily living, business operations. We often see quite a lot of small businesses fold because of the kind of over reliance on these standard procedures and the time that they take. So I think, it's just really where people are able to increase the time or increase the feasibility by using automated services, that would sort of be able to help a lot of these consumers that are coming to us. And it's just, even if you can't tell them the ins and outs, just to keep people updated and let them know kind of rough timelines. If you have kind of policies and procedures in place, to be really clear and upfront on them. If you think it's going to take kind of 2 weeks, make sure if it's going to take longer that you're updating them, and just kind of try and give that consumer side of it, even if you are investigating sort of criminal concerns.
Thanks, Hayley. And I think that is a truly kind of unique perspective, because you're able to, I guess, take some trends and key aspects of, a number of different investigations that have been conducted at the Ombudsman. So I guess from what you said there, I kind of take away the aspect of transparency where it's possible. And, obviously continuing to treat the consumer fairly and in line with any fair procedures and policies that are already in place, and obviously any relevant rules. So yeah, definitely good perspective to have, and one that I think our audience will be glad to hear. We will move on to the next topic then. So we want to discuss in a bit more detail how automation is changing casework. And with this, we can't have the conversation without talking about tech. So Una, I have another question for you, which is, how has automation helped to streamline investigations for any companies that you've consulted for, or in previous roles that you've maybe had?
It's a great question. And actually, one thing I would just comment there on what Hayley mentioned about kind of investigating, it's really, really important as well internally that we have the right skill sets to investigate. And she mentioned, law enforcement. When we're seeing a blend of skill sets in-house, especially with people with law enforcement backgrounds, we're actually getting much better results with the investigations, because they've been on the front line, and they're understanding the typologies much more readily than those in-house. So I just wanted to mention that. And you said what some of the challenges that we see today, and that is one of the challenges, a lack of the right skill sets internally. But in terms of automation, how is it changing casework, and how is it changing the workload? The big positive has been that we've been able to reduce false positives, especially with the implementation. We've seen some success stories. HSBC is a great example with reducing false positives from the systems. And previously, we were seeing around a 92% false positive rate. And that's like an industry average, which is pretty shocking. We've been able to reduce that significantly. And the automation isn't just about bringing in advanced technology. It's also about making sure that the alerts are actually routed to the right individuals with the right skill sets to review. So it's reduced the need for the number of L1, L2 reviewers. And one of the things that I've actually really enjoyed seeing was we previously were quite focused on KPIs for reviews. So there would have been, like, for example, TM alerts. Analysts are expected to get through on average around 10 alerts a day. That is actually a very, very dangerous approach. When you put a time constraint around reviews, you're already creating a risk for yourself that something will potentially be overlooked because the time isn't there to investigate thoroughly. And no two alerts are the same. So the automation that we have today, including more advanced technology and the usage of AI, has allowed us to actually get a much better kind of false positive ratio, but it's also enabled us to get the right alerts to the right people with the right skill sets to be able to review, not just an absolute avalanche of 92% false positives. And I'm sure that we can go through, and I'm sure Ina will talk as well from a SumSub perspective, that kind of step-by-step process in terms of, from the, how the alert is generated from the system through to the review cycle as well.
Thanks, Ina. And I appreciate the extra context there, because absolutely correct. You do need to have the right items going to the right teams and people with the right skill set in order to probably, work through those alerts at a pace that is acceptable. And so, yeah, we hope that through, some of the demonstrations that we'll share later on within the webinar, that you can see how quickly and efficiently you can sort of do that. But moving over to Hayley specifically for your perspective on this as well. At the Ombudsman, or in any other roles that you've held, have you come across any scenarios where automation actually created some risks during an investigative process?
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. Again, I think, as Una said, false positives, we have seen a lot of them, but I think also linked to that, we do sometimes see false negatives. And I think sometimes they are more dangerous, that, you've got kind of legitimate transactions being incorrectly flagged. That then potentially wastes resource from the financial firm, or even worse, that genuine money laundering activity slip through the cracks there. So I think, I completely agree with everything that Una said there. In terms of other things that we really see where automation has played a part, and as I said before, I don't want this to come across that automation is bad, because it certainly does speed things up, but I think that human intervention is still absolutely key. And I think, automation are all based on algorithms. Algorithms are trained on data. And if that data reflects kind of existing biases, which again, we see a lot, that could then result in discriminatory outcomes, unfairly maybe targeting specific demographics that we see. We deal with a lot of cases that are flagged due to sanctions, for example. And if you're training that algorithm to have a particular bias against a certain demographic based on where they're sending funds, that in itself is going to create kind of, whether it's a false positive or a false negative, it will create that false data that is then, taking up time and potentially then making genuine transactions go amiss. I think as well, for firms, that not only creates kind of ethical concerns, but also exposes the institutions to kind of legal and reputational risks, which then have that knock-on effect. So not only is that consumers complaining about something that's either gone wrong or they've been treated unfairly, but also brings into account that reputational risk for, whether people want to do business with you, depending on how their friend and so forth have then been treated. So I suppose for us, automation can definitely speed up processes, but it definitely shouldn't completely replace that human judgment. I think relying solely on automated systems without that adequate human oversight, it definitely, we've seen at the Financial Ombudsman that leads to a disconnect between the system's output and kind of the real world context as such. I think trained investigators in this field are absolutely crucial for interpreting those complex patterns. You need that human interaction to really define that anomaly and validate the findings of what the automated system throws up. So yeah, I would say, automation would offer significant advantages, but we always need to make sure that we don't over automate things, and then the transactions that we don't want to go amiss are kind of hidden because of trained biases or something in systems.
Yeah, that's a fantastic perspective, Hayley. And I think, we hope that our attendees will come to their own view, or probably already have their own viewpoint on what the correct balance is. And definitely from a SumSub perspective, we believe in enabling through technology. So we totally agree that, there needs to be an element of human intervention alongside the solutions that are implemented. But from your perspective, then, you obviously get to spend a lot of time with our clients. You'll sit and work through their requirements with them. You'll often show them what our solutions can do. What do you think has been kind of the main impact in terms of automation on those clients?
Yeah, it's definitely about reducing false positive and false negatives as well. And I think it kind of like that's what already has been mentioned about one of the greatest way on how to also speed up all the operational efficiency and just be able to optimize resource much better. But it also gives so much more impact on being able to use that very valuable resource on places where it's genuinely needed, and to investigate genuinely suspicious cases. So automation helps a lot with repetitive daily tasks that don't have to be done manually, and definitely help with the resource management and overall flows and processes of the teams.
Thank you. And again, appreciate that insight. Obviously, we're speaking very specifically about some sub-clients here, but I'm sure that would also apply to lots of the attendees that we have on the call today as well. So thank you for sharing that. And whilst we move over to the next topic, would like to issue another poll just to get some insights from our audience. So the question is, what's your biggest AML investigation headache? Is it 1, high volumes of false positives, we've just discussed, lack of resources, disconnected systems, maybe escalation delays, or STR/SAR backlogs? I'm sure each and every one of them is a worthy enough headache in itself, but please share the one that drives you mad the most. Okay. I think we have a few answers coming in. High volumes of false positives, usually up there, the number one. It's leading the way at about 60% at the moment. So yeah, I'm glad that we covered that within the last topic as well. And then hopefully we'll cover, some ways to manage that again as we come towards the end of the webinar. So whilst we kind of wait for any other entries to come in, we want to talk about some of the risks in more detail and the risks of over automation. We did slightly cover it, I think, within the last section, and I guess it's because we've got so many opinions and different viewpoints on it, but I'm going to ask some more questions around it, so hopefully we've got some more answers. To Una, very direct question, do you think there's a danger in relying too much on automation?
100% yes. Even Hayley alluded to it in what she was saying, systems can't replace people. Automation is all well and good in whatever format it is to improve efficiencies. But, with every automation, we need a human mind overseeing it. And Hayley also mentioned the challenge with built-in bias, which we're beginning to now understand more readily with the implementation of various AI technologies. So automation should be used to look for efficiencies in your process, to remove repetitive manual processes. But automation can never replace, decision making by a human mind. So we need to make sure that where we do have automated processes at key trigger points or output points, that we have an individual with the required skill set, reviewing the alerts that are coming through. That also means backtesting the system as well, going back to Hayley's point on bias, to make sure that bias hasn't been embedded in the decision-making of the system as well. There will come a point, it's, and I won't say the near future, but there will come a point in the future where our systems will be capable of making more advanced decisions, but ultimately there will always need to be a human mind at the key output stages. So are there risks of over automation? Yes. And very importantly, don't automate for the sake of automating. Before you even decide to automate, you need to clean up your data. And many organizations are swimming in what I refer to as data sewage pits. You need to create one source of the truth for your data. And that also will mean looking across your various risk functions and back office systems. So for example, credit risk and, the financial crime team will both obtain similar, if not the same, documents at varying stages of the client life cycle. If you have a credit exposure, your facility and your ability to handle that exposure will be reviewed every 6 months. But if you're a low risk client, your account may only be reviewed every 3 years, if even in some organizations. And fundamentally here, we have the data updated on the customer in the credit files, but that is not filtering through to the compliance to the AML files. So before you even consider automation, first clean up your data and then ask yourself, what is your problem statement? And only then begin to look at solutions available in the market to support you. Just jumping in and buying in a system, you're going to basically create a noose for your own neck where you basically brought in a system that may not be fit for purpose. So there's a lot of work to be done before automation occurs. And my other piece of advice in automation is slowly and surely wins the race. Big bang approaches, I've seen many of them throughout my 20 plus years, and they're never successful. If anything, they create more headaches than they're worth, including significant backlogs with false positives. So there's many pitfalls to automation. The advantages are immense as long as it has been done in a clear and constructive way.
Thanks, Una. And I think, a key takeaway there is, as you say, proceed with caution, do the proper assessment, work within the frameworks, the regulatory frameworks that we've been given. They're there for a reason, and totally agree that system testing, assurance, etc., needs to be done really, really thoroughly before.
If I may just make a point to that, Nal, if you don't mind, just on regulation. One of the things that concerns me a lot is that we have too many people following regulation without understanding their own risk profiles. And I've seen multiple AML risk assessments where if I map them back, the actual foundation is regulatory mapping, not the risk. So one of the things that I would definitely say here is, where you're looking to automate, go back to your AML risk assessment and understand the foundation point. Are you building your risk assessment out from the inherent risk in your products, your services, your client base, your geographic exposure, industry exposure, or have you mapped it at its foundation against regulation? Because if it's mapped against regulation to start with, you're starting at the wrong point, and that is going to lead to very ineffective automation and indeed risk controls.
Thank you. And definitely one food for thought for the audience. Two very different things, very different risk assessments as well. So over to Hayley, same question to you.
Yeah, so again, I completely agree with everything Una said. So I suppose, to just add to that, I suppose the best thing for me to do here would be to share some kind of top tips as to how everything Una just said. I would, sort of establish clear governance and accountability structures when using automation. So, really define roles and responsibilities within your teams for that system oversight, include data quality in that, model validation, escalation procedures. So if something doesn't look right, who that's escalated to, because I think that, somebody owning the process and being accountable for that automation and the performance of it, it then allows you to make sure that you're staying on top of it and that you're not over relying on that automation piece. As Una says, the positives that it can bring to the world of anti-money laundering in particular, I think is huge, and I think we should definitely lean into that where we can, but we need to do that with that kind of, someone really needs to own that, and we can't over rely on it, because that's then, when things can go miss. I think secondly to that, really kind of prioritizing that transparency. So, ensuring that the logic in it is understandable, document the algorithms that are used, keep reviewing them, the same as we would in manual processes. Don't just think that because we've put something in there at one point, that's going to stay as it should be forever. So, somebody, again, really keeping on top of that. make sure the data sources that the automation systems relying on are actually reliable data sources. Again, if something needs to be updated, make sure it's updated on the time that it is, or there's an automatic update. And it's just really kind of keeping on top of that sort of model validation and testing, so assessing the accuracy, and that's where again the human intervention is going to come into this, that we won't know that the automation is working unless someone's reviewing it. That doesn't need to be every day. It doesn't need to be every transaction. It might not need to be every week. I think that's for each individual firm to kind of work out what their risk base is. And as Una said, actually really understanding the regulations that they're held accountable for, making sure they've got a kind of clear risk assessment in place, and that everybody who's working alongside that understands what that risk is. I think it's really kind of key that's going to help. And then probably linking to that, just making sure that you've got independent audits and reviews. Rely on that outside of your own institutions, outside of your own firms. Use the documents that are available to really kind of not necessarily compare, but sharing that good practice, bringing in those external auditors, making sure that you're compliant with the regulatory requirements, internal policies. And I just think that that's the one way that you can use automation to the best advantages without being caught out by, as we say, kind of the risk of the overuse there. And that's going to end up with hopefully kind of better business, happier consumers, and business will then kind of thrive through that.
Thanks, Hayley. And I'll probably just add a couple of words to that, in the sense that we talk about over automation and those risks, but tied to this is a conversation around over reliance as well. And I think what you've mentioned there around testing and assurance, and making sure that somebody who is accountable and responsible for those automated processes, or relationships with third parties, for example, continue to assess that and make sure that things are working the way that they should. Yes, data updates should, in the most part, happen automatically, but things can go wrong. So, just taking an example of maybe a third party AML data provider who provides information on sanctions, or, whatever it may be, you need to also, as the responsible operator, make sure that you're happy with those updates, that things aren't being missed. And of course, the third party will have its own obligations in relation to that as well. So, really interesting topic to cover. I think we'll move on now to KPIs or measures of success, once we've perhaps gone through all that process that we've just covered. We've done the test and the assurance, we've assured that there's no biases inbuilt. We're happy now to, continue with whatever technology or automated process it is. How can we measure the success? So I think the first question is to Una. We don't need to talk maybe specifically about KPIs, but if you do have any, you can share those. But what metrics or KPIs do clients or the industry typically track to evaluate successful automation?
Resourcing, the money being spent on reviews, false positives. And one of the things that I've actually seen in a number of organizations, or should I say not seen, which scares me slightly, is a lack of MI, management information. Your management information is absolutely critical to understand where your top and emerging risks are within your organization. And that also means in respect of screening systems, client onboarding, and even transaction monitoring, you'll be able to look at the alerts, the number of alerts that are coming out of your system day to day versus month to month, and your resourcing needs. And you should be able to very quickly estimate whether or not you have the right resourcing model in place to support what the system is outputting, because we can obtain spikes. So one of the things that, even before I would go to kind of KPIs, that I would go back to is making sure that you have good, solid management information, statistics coming out from your systems to show which alerts are driving your SARs, which alerts are basically increasing the number of transaction monitoring alerts in the system. Is that a sign of a calibration issue, or do you have an increased risk in your book that wasn't previously understood? These are all areas for continuous improvement and strategic, and kind of, how I can say it, positive ways within which to manage risk and resourcing and upskilling opportunities within your organization? Does your team have the right skill sets necessary or knowledge necessary to review changes in financial crime typologies that are coming through as well? So before I would even, as I said earlier, I'm not a big fan of KPIs when it comes to clearing alerts, because I've seen the damage that that can do. But what I would say is if you have good, solid management information in place and you're using that, and I wouldn't even say periodically, you should be using that as part of your day-to-day management of the oversight of your function. And again, the risk sits with senior executive leadership. They need to see this information to understand where the evolving risks are within their organizations, so we can front run those emerging risks and have the right resourcing models, skill sets in place before the actual risk itself is, should I say, realized. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you. And I think this is an alternative way to think about it, as you said. There are other measures of success that are not always directly tied to KPIs. And so I think, as a result, again, of the risk assessment and stuff that we talked about previously within the webinar, those metrics will obviously be set based off of risk assessment that's conducted, other terms of AML and CTF risk that you've managed to assess and identify. So yeah, thank you, Una. That's a really good perspective for our audience. And Una, I have a same question to you, based off of, I guess, the interactions and, insight that you've been able to gain through client interactions on our side.
Yeah. I think it is very helpful to keep track of basic KPIs about compliance officers' work and how long time it takes to review certain cases and what are the topics in there. But I also share very much Una's opinion that I think it's very important also to have a further understanding on why is it taking, how much time and why are we spending time on this, mostly from the resource perspective and just understanding where do we need more know-how and how we can give more insight and in being able to handle those cases in a more efficient way. So tracking KPIs can be very useful, and the technology should be definitely standing behind it and helping you in that. But it's just also what you do later on with those KPIs is very important and to help to manage and streamline your processes.
Thanks, Una. And yeah, I think, again, when we come to later on in the webinar, we'll maybe show how some of those can, for example, be tracked or whatever it is in terms of operational and, that control side of things. So yeah, I guess from the discussion, the key takeaway here is there's probably not one size fits all. Do the risk assessment, and after that, you'll be able to determine what it is that you should be tracking. And there are lots of different ways to track. KPIs may be part of that, but it's not the be all and end all. So thank you. We will move on to, I think, our next topic before we have another poll, actually. So we do want to cover some aspects of best practice, and any top tips that we can provide to the audience who are maybe thinking about starting automation or at least expanding, their automation framework. So question, it's just the one, and it's to Una this time. For any teams that are just beginning that journey for automation, what's your top tips or advice? I think we've probably covered some of it already.
Diversity within the team, diversity of skill sets. If I hired, 10 owners into a team, which would be a nightmare for anybody, one of us is enough. But I need healthy challenge. I need to be with a group of people with different skill sets and mindsets, and knowledge and experience, so that we can implement the optimal solution for the organization. So first and foremost, with any automation, I would bring in various different skill sets. I would have an engineer in the team. I would have a regulatory specialist in the team. I would have somebody from a law enforcement background in the team. And I would be wanting to sit, and maybe somebody as well, importantly with an auditing background as well, because the audit trail is critical. I would want a diverse skill set within that conversation to look at the most optimal way to automate, like what is the best engineering output that we can get. But most importantly, going back, what is the fundamental problem statement? And then challenge one another with the solutions and the ideas that we come up with. When I see that working well within organizations, if I may say it, because I love being in compliance, it is actually beautiful to see what you can come up with. It's so innovative. And we are getting much more freedom now as an industry to be more innovative. And we're seeing that, I mentioned HSBC earlier as a great example in the AI space, but there are other organizations doing really great work as well. So make sure at the very beginning of your journey that that decision and that automation involves a number of different skill sets, knowledge, and background. And one of the questions that actually came through was a question around how often should we be reviewing and updating scenarios and risk parameters? And the challenge is, in today's age, with the evolution of financial crime typologies, this could be an endless, continuous task. So we need to make sure that we're aware of the environment that's evolving around us, because we could automate based on today, which is static. And by the time the automation is completed in 9 to 12 months, we may have moved on significantly in terms of the financial crime typologies, or indeed the sophistication or lack of sophistication of typologies that have evolved. So it's really, really important as well in that automation journey that this doesn't become a static at this point in time, because we are always going to be on the back foot when it comes to identifying financial crime typologies in our books. But if you're building an automated system based on today's knowledge that won't go live until 9 to 12 months down the road, once all of the system updates, etc., have happened, you're already maybe 5 or 6 steps behind. So, diverse skill sets, keeping your eye on the ball, agility is key in terms of the process, and making sure that we are identifying changes in typologies during this process as well.
Thanks, Una. And I think you speak not only for compliance and AML professionals alike, but probably product people as well, who also agree that there should be a range of diverse skill sets within those conversations when the product itself or solutions are being designed, because it can't be static, it has to be dynamic in order to respond obviously to those changes in typologies as you've just mentioned. I think we now have an option here for a poll, so we'll go with the next one, which is, do you trust automated systems to make investigative decisions? Yes, with oversight. Yes, fully. No, prefer a human-led approach, or depends on the case. And we'll wait for those to come through. Whilst we load up our next topic. All right, and we are now going to look ahead. I'll come back to the poll just once everybody's had a chance to vote. I've got the last couple of questions before we move over to some exciting news from us. For Una, what do you think is going to be the biggest game changer in AML investigations over the next 5 years? And that might be a bit forward looking. So if you haven't quite had a chance to think about the next 5 years, then feel free to cover the next 12 to 24.
Firstly, I must apologise. When I spoke last, I accidentally hit my glass. It wasn't a mic drop moment. I made such a good response to that. I'm just going to celebrate myself. What's going to change? What I'm hoping will be the game changer are two things. I'm expecting really, really big things out of AMLA. This is obviously very European focused. I'm expecting big things out of AMLA, including significantly increased coordination and information sharing across FIUs. As a result of that, and I'm going to say the dreaded PPP, public-private partnerships, and I say the dreaded because we talk a lot about it, but you're yet to see real tangible results. We need information sharing not to work from the banks upwards, but we need it to come top down. We don't want to hinder in any way ongoing investigations, but we also need to understand the evolving typologies that are happening. So I'm excited to see FIU harmonization across Europe and what that will look like with the increased use of technology. I'm really excited to see how improved data flows and consolidation of data will help us better identify complex networks in our book that we couldn't otherwise see. And thirdly, public-private partnerships should also serve as a really good, should I say, sounding board for not just information sharing, but upskilling across the board. So, the banks educating the investigators and the FIUs and what they're seeing, the FIUs and the investigators working with the police force and law enforcement to see what's developing within the industry. I want to see a lot more information sharing, and I think that that's really what's going to be a game changer. Ultimately, it comes down to data sharing and the increased use of data, and that's in every conference I've been at for the last year, which is a lot because I go to conferences often. Everybody is talking about this, but we're yet to see real tangible outputs. We have seen efforts such as FIMLIT and GIMLIT, especially starting in Hong Kong under Paul Jeftovich when he was at HSBC, bringing together other financial crime experts within other banks to talk about, on a no-name basis, typologies they were seeing in their book. We need to see much more of that happening real time to be able to tackle a pandemic of scams that was basically impacting the industry. And I'm sure Hayley deals with this day in, day out in terms of the pandemic that is on our hands. And I think it's not fair to place this all on the banks either. They're absolutely inundated. They're snowed under. And we really need something to fundamentally change to support the industry. So more top-down information is going to be a game changer, but also cross-sharing and cross-skill set uplifts as well.
Thank you, Una. And with that, in reference to Hayley's work, whilst we're sort of running out of time and we want to get on to the next phase, but Hayley, again, considering your work at the Financial Ombudsman, in reference to, I guess, Una's response and the question, that I put to Una, what are you observing in terms of key trends, etc., and what do you envisage to be kind of like more key trends going into the next 12, 24 months?
Yeah, so I think for us, we're seeing, increased sophistication of financial crime. Criminals are constantly evolving their methods. They're looking at more kind of sophisticated techniques like layering transactions across multiple accounts and jurisdictions, and that's kind of obviously obscuring the origin of where the illicit funds are coming from. And I think that's obviously making the investigations themselves be more kind of data heavy, more complex, needing a lot more kind of involvement in that. I think, again, we see a lot of vulnerable customers, and, criminals are really kind of going into exploiting those vulnerabilities in individuals, particularly those with limited financial literacy or those kind of susceptible to scams, for example. And again, I think for banks that are on the call and looking at your own processes, this, that in itself places a greater emphasis on identifying and protecting those vulnerable customers during the investigation process, and that we're never going to kind of be able to stop that. But I think the more you know about your customers up front, the more you can kind of be ahead of the game when things like this then happen. But yes, I think, I think someone's mentioned it in one of the questions, the rise of kind of cryptocurrencies and virtual assets, that's presenting, new challenges in itself for AML compliance. And again, the cross-border nature of these, which I think so many more criminals are leaning into. And I think, it's becoming harder to trace those transactions and identify parties that are involved. But we need to move with the times, that the criminals are becoming more sophisticated, which means our investigations need to be more sophisticated as well. So yeah, I'm conscious of time, but I feel like I could go on about that for ages. But it's more just, I think, really know your customers, know their vulnerabilities, know what they're susceptible to, and then be alert to the wider landscape, not just for your own jurisdiction that you're dealing with, but if you know that your customers are involved in different jurisdictions, be very alert to that, and just kind of try and keep your eyes on that goal, really.
Hayley, Una, thank you very much for engaging in this insightful conversation with me today. The audience has lots of questions. I think we'll try to answer those as we kind of move through the next phase of the webinar. And obviously we can do follow-up afterwards. So Inna, we don't have much time, but can I please hand over to you to share some really exciting news with the audience today?
Yes, I'm very excited also to do a short demo about SumSub case management solution. So it has been launched today. We have updated our case management solution. We already had it previously, but now it's a newer, more advanced, more enhanced version of it that has a lot of automation features included in it, and some of them I would like to show you. Also some AI, which is again very cool and very that's something that can be really, really helpful and for the compliance officers to just streamline the work and make the decisions much faster and more efficient, and understand in cases where they need to spend more time and investigate and put more effort into some cases. But let's start with the demo. I hope you all see my screen. So what I'm sharing right now, it's a case management view of SumSub dashboard. And here the first thing that we show and offer is to be able to create a blueprint. Blueprint is something that offers where it allows you to prioritize high-risk cases and assign them to specialized team, which can be tracked as part of the operational metrics then as well. So this is something where you can create your own blueprints, or we have already 4 preset blueprints available here based on different topics. So it can be for a sanction screening, for PEP and sanction list, for anti-money laundering investigations and compliance, suspicious activity for fraud prevention teams, KYC, so onboarding and due diligence works. So here we just have a general overview of the blueprint, where you would be able to choose the name, description. We can also choose which kind of teams we can escalate it between. So in the blueprint, it's possible to escalate and reassign the cases and the workload between different teams. In case of investigation process, you would understand that actually it's much more involved there. You want to include other teams, or you would like to reassign the whole case to a different team. You can specify here on which teams can be included in different cases. We can also select specific people that we would like to assign those cases to, so we can again automate and streamline the process as much as possible, and nothing would be stuck behind manual decisions or waiting for someone to assign the task for correct compliance officer. We can also customize a lot of what is seen inside of case through the blueprint solution. So we can customize the whole content of what AML controls, identity information, reporting verifications, and so on. Financial data and sources is available. Also, limits and devices information is something that is coming very, very soon. So there's still a lot of exciting things coming up from the case management. And yeah, then we create the blueprints and we can start working with them. All different blueprints that will be created will be seen in the list view. So depending from different user rights, people will be seeing different things. If they have enough rights, then the compliance officers will be seeing all the lists, or it can also be some only lists that are supposed to be assigned to them and nothing else. So it's fully customizable from here. And here then every specific list will have the cases that are arising from either verification flows or transaction monitoring. So this is also something that can be customized. You can either keep it separately, or you can put it all together, where, for example, AML, screening, and PEP an adverse media hits, can be reviewed, either that comes separately from the onboarding and due diligence flows, or from the transaction monitoring, where, for example, we also screen counterparty details and so on. So this is something that can be set up in the levels of verification flow and transaction monitoring rules on how specifically the cases would be created as well. And then Blueprint will help to assign and streamline the works in there. But when we look in one of the cases that was created with the help of the Blueprint, we can see what's the aim, or what this case was even created. We can see how that it was triggered automatically from one financial transaction. We can see all the information about this applicant or customer as well. We can also see if there's any related cases. We can see the financial data, full audit log reporting is available here as well. It's possible to generate the report in Go AML standards. It's possible to escalate it and send for review for different team, for example. That also allows to do 4i reviews or maker checker flows. So a lot of possibilities. Notes obviously is a very important part of any case management, and option to add attachments and files here. So if any information is available outside of some subsystem, it's always possible to include it in here as well. And one of the very cool new features that also, in addition to Blueprint, we have an AI overview where we have our AI agent, Sami, who thinks a little bit and then will give you an overview of why this case was created, what are the main things to keep in mind or look at. So instead of spending time and going through all the tabs and all the information, seeing what has happened, what has been the history, it puts together a very comprehensive, good overview of what has happened, with who was the transaction made, that it was triggered automatically, what kind of rule triggered it. It also gives other important insight. There's no other rules that were triggered that were concerning in this. But are there other open cases related maybe to this case? And gives just maybe a guidance and just helps in saving time and power to concentrate on the cases that are truly important and see if there's anything that potentially could be missed by human eye and the fast compliance case processing that it tends to be. Yeah, so case management definitely allows you to have all these different flows, as we don't have too much time, so I would maybe not go very much into detail into different areas, but we do provide regulatory reporting in our case management, and overall we can provide different kind of reports for regulators, but also reporting is something that is so very important to understand. The compliance officer works, how long time does it take to resolve different kind of cases, and all of this analytical part of the case management is also present here. So I think that's the main and the most exciting features that I wanted to show. Definitely the Blueprint and our Sami AI agent, very exciting new releases, and hope you would be able to try them all out and see the real benefits in action as well.
Thank you, Ina, for a consolidated demo. Normally we take a bit longer to do, but we are running out of time today and conscious of our attendees and speakers' time. So thank you so much. We will just post one last poll for you to let us know if you would like to be contacted to see how SumSub can help with AML case automation and all of the things that we've discussed today in the webinar. You can, yes, you'd love to see a more detailed demo, no, not right now, or maybe later. And in the interest of time, we will try to, I think, just answer a couple more questions that are within the chat as of the next couple of minutes. But anything that's, had a large number of votes, we will try and follow up with, post the webinar. So again, thank you very, very much to our speakers who took the time out today, and for everybody who helped with the organizing. Thank you for the engagement and, giving your answers towards the polls and asking any insightful questions. We'll definitely follow up with those questions that were heavily voted on. It seems like we should do this after the webinar. And that's all we've got time for today. So thank you, Hayley, Una, Inna, for your time. Hope that you have a lovely day onwards. And yeah, thank you for everybody for attending.